delay, more than 2 minutes late.
Okay. Live?
Yep.
Right. Welcome. And welcome to those that might be watching this on the live stream. Just a quick housekeeping thing. There's no plan for alarms, so if it goes off, it would be for real. So can somebody please grab me and make the way to the first exit. Welcome to our visitors. I'll get you to introduce yourselves in a moment. I've got a note here. We've got apologies from Don Morris. Susan's not feeling too well, but she's attending online. Hi. And David is subbing currently for Alex. Yeah, welcome, David. Right. Our first visitors. If you want to introduce yourself by name, that's up to you. I've got names, but I didn't declare them. But you might want to.
Hello. Good afternoon. My name's Hugh Thomas. I work at Thames Water. My role at Thames is to act as the sort of local government liaison. So I'm kind of point of contact for you guys if you've got anything that you need to raise. So Sophie has come to me, and I've brought a colleague of mine, Tim, who will introduce himself in a moment. Just to make sure we've got the right people here and we can answer your questions this afternoon.
Leads over to me. So Tim Beach, or equally work for Thames Water. I'm in our environmental engagement team, primarily working underneath our sustainability director on all things healthy rivers. So hopefully I can answer as many of the questions as I can today. If there's anything we can't answer, we'll obviously take it away. But yeah, hopefully we'll go up ahead.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for all the advance that you've put in. I'm going to run through this. Will be a bit boring for members because we'll do it with everyone, but we've got questions here 1 to 10. If you wanted to address those, and then it'll be over to members for any supplementaries. Okay. If you want to embellish on anything you put it in advance, then feel free to do so. This isn't a witch hunt. This is purely a piece of scrutiny work. We're gathering basically evidence and information for anything we might wish to do in the future. So over to you. What actions do you take? Do you have to tackle both cleaning up existing and stopping future river pollution? And associated timescales for these?
Simple question, isn't it? One with not such a simple answer, I think. So it's a very complex issue, and we're doing a huge amount of work in this space, as you can expect over the last couple of years. There's been a huge pressure and interest locally for us to clean up sewer overflows and sewer discharges. So we have many different programs within our current business plan. We have I don't know if you want me to go down to detail what they are, but we've got surface water management plans to reduce the amount of surface water that gets into our systems. That is primarily one of the biggest challenges for us, is that most of our sewer network is inundated by either surface water getting directly into the sewers through people's houses or through roads or through the ground. So groundwater levels infiltrating through cracks and into our sewers. And that's generally the reason why most of our sewer systems become overwhelmed and therefore have to discharge reluctantly into the environment. So we have surface water management plans surface water management plan to try and reduce the amount of surface water getting in. We have groundwater impact management plans. These are long-term plans and which have short, medium, and long-term sort of intervals in them for us to try and stop that surface water getting in under the ground. So we have teams across our operations teams that go out and line our sewers, line manholes, and stop what we call death by 1,000 cuts, which is lots of little small drips and drabs getting in everywhere. If we identify quick wins, gushers as they're called, we obviously fix them straight away. But the longer term is about relining our sewer networks over a long period of time in areas that are highly susceptible to groundwater getting in. Do you want to comment? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just to put a bit of sort of subcontext around it as well. Obviously, as Thames Water, we only look after part of your region. So obviously, as county, you've got other authorities. Tewkesbury, Forest, Dean, Cheltenham, Gloucester, etc. Whereas we're very much the sort of Cotswold part of the basin, which runs down almost from kind of Bourton on the Water, for us obviously down towards Cirencester and then South Turning. So as well as the sort of plans that Tim has been talking about, we have actually, we're not just waiting to plan and let's see what we do next. We've done a lot of work over the last 12 months in particular. We've done several hundred metres of lining in Cirencester, about 1 kilometre in Bourton on the Water. And these are things that are happening now. And as well as those, we are doing individual upgrades to several of our sewage treatment works. Kind of running down from the north, we've got quite a big piece that we're doing in Bourton. We're doing a lot in Cirencester. We're doing work in Fairford. And what we're doing at those works, and Tim will be able to get into it in more detail, but there's kind of two sides of things. One is to increase the amount of water that we can treat before it needs to go to storm, if you like, but also increasing the storm capacity at sites. So we've got bigger storm tanks, so that if there is a huge deluge, we can actually hold more water, which we can then put back into the start of the works and treat before releasing it. So they are pretty big programmes of work. The other consequence, the good consequence of this work, as well as not spilling to rivers, it means not having flooding of people's homes as well. So by keeping as much water as we can out of the network and only having in there what we can, it just makes everything a lot nicer for the rivers, but also a lot more pleasant for your residents. So in summary, they're pretty big plans. There's quite a few bits that are going to be delivered over the next sort of 3.5 years, Tim, between now and 2025. There will be further stuff that Tim was talking about, sort of drainage waste management plans, which are looking through until about 2050.
Yeah,
I think
2040. Yeah,
2040. So that's much kind of longer term planning, but there's a lot happening now. But it does start at quite small scale stuff of just sealing little leaks in sewers and stopping that kind of groundwater and stuff getting in, all the way up to the big stuff of making bigger storm tanks in the works.
Thank you. Members? Paul?
Can we ask more general questions, or how do you want to play it?
Well,
I've got quite a few general questions I'd like to ask the two guys.
Yeah, and given Thames is very much your area, I'm perfectly happy. If members are content, I'm not here to curtail anything.
All right, thank you. Obviously, Hugh and I know each other a bit from. A few questions I've got. I mean, we spoke to the Environment Agency on Friday, I think it was, and they talked about fines. The fines that are imposed on companies like yourself. So my sort of question is, how have the fines that have been imposed on you changed behaviour in your company? So, as an example, for instance, I noticed that 6 months ago there was a £4 million fine to Thames Water. How has your behaviour changed as a result of that fine and others?
I would say no one welcomes a fine. We don't want fines. Obviously, that's really not good because it takes away money that we could spend on other good things for our customers. But fines are part of a driver, but I think it's a much bigger driver these days for doing the right thing. And I think as a business, we have just turned the corner somewhat, I think it's fair to say. And it is just very much the right thing to do. Let's look after the rivers. It is, the communities that we live in as well as you. And as a business, it just feels like it's what we should be doing. So it's certainly something our shareholders are very much invested in, that they feel that as a business they want to be seen to be partners with. They don't want someone who is getting fines or, getting mentions in the press or is, generating a lot of stuff coming in from customers and residents about dissatisfaction about sewer discharges. So it's not just fines driving the behaviour, it's part of it, but we are changing.
Okay. And in terms of eradicating sewage overflows, one of the EA suggestions is to have more significant storage, as that's an option. Yeah, because the other one is obviously separating out the two types of, which to quote the EA would take a huge amount of money and many, many years. Yeah. Is the significant storage option a possibility for you?
it is a possibility. It would cost in the billions for us to be able to do that for each of our 350 catchments, sewage catchments in the Thames region. And then it's still a case of how much storage would you need to go to. It's a finite system essentially, and it's far more sustainable for us to take that surface water out and make our system not susceptible to these storms, and therefore we wouldn't need to keep building bigger treatment works all the time. So I think it's on the face of it, yes, we could build bigger tanks and it will hold for a certain amount of time, but in some of our catchments it would buy us 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever. It's not going to buy you if a Noah's Ark type event happens. Unfortunately, water has to go somewhere, and it either goes into people's houses or, unfortunately, into the rivers. And that's something that's happened by heritage. So I slightly disagree with the EA on that respect, because I think how far do you go? How big a storm do you design for? Unfortunately, we're seeing more and more frequent, high-intensity storms, and I don't think that's a sustainable solution.
It is that thing, isn't it? If you look at, I mean, it's outside of our area, but if you look at what happened at Tewkesbury some years ago, you know, the town was pretty much surrounded. It was just a huge lake, wasn't it? You couldn't store that. There's no way of building a tank that would hold that. But as Tim says, it is part of the solution, and we are doing those things at places like Siren Treatment Works and at Wharton, and we are increasing the capacity, but it is finite. So the other side of it is very much, instead of having to store it, let's not have it in the network in the first place. And it's just trying to, even before the idea of separation, let's just look at what can be done with schemes, with local authorities on the planning side of things, surface water management plans, and just make sure that, say, before it even comes to the point of separation, let's just stop it from coming in where we can. Hence, quite a large sort of lining programme, and looking at that side of things. And as well, we're working in places like Fairford with Andrew Doherty, who I'm sure you know. Looking at putting some schemes in there, putting water butts on people's houses. Again, it just creates some extra storage. It is helpful during a short deluge, and it might buy people an extra day. And then if the following day it quietens down, you can empty your water butt, let the water go slowly, and hopefully you've just taken the top off of that storm. But it's not a strategic solution, but it's helpful. So I think storage it's kind of like that. It's part of the answer.
Okay, final question.
Yes, sure.
Given your answers there, when will Thames Water then eradicate and eliminate sewage outflows? What's the timescale? What's your deadline? What's your target?
I mean, our long-term, our 2050 vision, which the company is setting at the moment, is to aim for zero pollutions by 2050.
2050.
That's the date we're aiming for at the moment.
Right.
And that hopefully gives an indication of how much investment is likely to be needed to bring down spills to zero or to cause no harm by that date.
So 30 more years of it? That's what you're saying.
So I think what we're saying is 30 years until zero,
Yeah.
but we're not saying, and it'll be full tilt until 49 years' time. You know, it is an aspirational plan over a period. We are doing works along the way, which I've just talked about. Some of what we're doing at Morton, Fairford, Siren, some of these other works, Byberry's and all. So yeah, we're not waiting until the end, but by that time we do want to have knocked it on the head. But a lot of work to do on the way, and we are doing work along the way.
It's like an exponential curve with spills. You can spend a small amount of money to get a big bang for buck. It's the last sort of 5-10% which will get you down to zero, which costs the most. So I think that's it's not a case of it's a linear line between now and 2050. It's that we are ensuring our business plan now that we're designing for 2025 to 2030. So our next business plan really has a strong emphasis on how do we target and get the best bang for buck and getting the number down from, I think we had 18,000 spills in 2020 across the whole region. What can we do to get that number down as close to zero as we can with the funding that we have? So yeah, it's a long journey that we're on. And I think that acknowledges it's not a silver bullet. There is no silver bullet with this stuff. It's multiple different types of programming that are needed. And, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, and on that, we can have a go at our infrastructure first, and certainly some of the bigger pieces first, and that's what's going to make the big difference at the start. But again, as Tim says, towards the end, when you start getting down to someone has got a drain below their kitchen sink window, where every time it rains, water's flowing in and stuff like that. To get all of these bits done, and then to find people who are willfully doing things like that, just getting rid of water out of their gardens, chucking it into our sewers, going through a prosecution process and all that kind of thing, is kind of at the back end of things, really. But there's a lot of big stuff that we can do first that will take kind of the majority off the top of it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Given it's very much Thames Water, very much Cotswold, I'll go from this end. Stephen, anything from you?
On Friday, the EA gentleman said that fines were part of the budgeting process. So you are expecting fines. Now, if that's so, does that in fact reduce the amount of concern that you have with fines because it's in the budget?
It's not budgeted for in a positive way. We don't put money aside and let's make a plan and we'll spill this much money and have this many fines. It's quite the opposite of that. But as I said earlier, fines are something which probably help grease the wheels towards what we want to do and to get things down to zero. But it's not the only mechanism behind that.
Does it grease the wheels instead of acting?
No, by greasing the wheels, I mean it gets the plan up and moving. It actually pushes things along, and it's part of that mechanism, but it's not the reason that we are looking to get down to zero. But we don't positively budget as such to be fined. That would be completely the wrong way around looking at things.
Thank you.
Anyone else down this side? Yes, Nick.
Just one from me. You mentioned around the lining programme that you've got. Have you got sort of targets on how much of the network you're planning to get sort of relined? And if so, when's that by? I'm assuming that you have like an overall amount of work that you assume needs to be relined, and the timescales and when that'll be done by. Just wondering how far along that process you are.
So we've got, it's a good question. We've got 56 catchments in our region that we consider highest risk in terms of groundwater getting into our systems. And they are the ones that have these groundwater impacted system management plans. We can send you a link afterwards. They're all on our website. We have a plan for each of those 56 catchments. It's a two-parter really. Most of those are having operational fix-on-fail type linings done as and when operations identify these highest risk gushes as they're known, where we identify there's a huge amount of water coming into this manhole, let's just fix it now. Most of those plans are about identifying where are the highest susceptible sewers, where we know groundwater is likely to be getting in. Because the problem with groundwater is identifying when and where it's coming in. Because either if you can't CCTV, you can't survey when it's full, because it's full, and when it's dry in the winter, summer months, you don't see it getting in. So most of it is about modelling where we predict the certain lengths are highest priority. And what we're doing is we're putting those into our plan for our next business plan, which is 2025 to 2030, to line those. We are trialling a couple of those catchments now to see how successful they are. So I think that's Whitney and Bourton on the Water, I think, are our two ones where we're going to trial that to see about how successful is it to proactively line sections we think are causing us problems. And then if it is successful, we would then roll it out to the other 54 catchments in the next investment period from 2025.
It sounds like this is quite a sort of a new concept then, sort of, is this quite a new thing you've brought in?
It's not new, it's that the benefit really varies. So what you end up doing is we can end up lining, we spent millions in the past lining sewers, and all you end up doing is moving the groundwater level slightly higher, and it ends up getting in through the next sewer or through customer laterals, which we're not responsible for. So we actually have lined a whole catchment before, but not the private laterals, so everyone's domestic drains. And we saw no difference in terms of the spills at the treatment works. So we're now trying to do a targeted approach and see if that makes a difference, because what we don't want to do is spend millions of pounds just chasing our tail somewhat. We've actually estimated it for Whitney, not in this catchment, but Whitney is an example, would cost us 60 million to line the catchment. We wouldn't want to spend 60 million and see no benefit. So yeah, we're doing a much more targeted approach now. Fix on fail, where we actually identify specific locations, and then more modelled approach going forwards. So those, yeah, we can send a link with all those plans if you're after a specific catchment.
Don't send them to me.
They're quite a reach.
But yeah, it's one of these things where there are longer term strategies through some of the plans, but we also have quite an active sort of find and fix thing where our guys are out. And if they see any kind of defect, or if they look in one manhole and it's a little bit of flow in there, then the next manhole, quarter mile down the road, and it's flowing at full pelt. We know there's something in the middle, so we get a camera down there. If we find a hole in the sewer, we'll fix it. So that's fairly kind of reactive, but it is getting quite a lot of work done. Then there is the bit that Tim talks about where we look at catchments to decide, right, let's focus here and have an actual strategy behind what we're doing as opposed to just the find and fix side of things. But it is kind of around this time of year when that groundwater is coming up and the sewers aren't completely submerged, but they might be sort of half full, so you can actually see where it's coming in when you do get a camera down there. But it's quite a narrow cusp of when it's coming up or coming down. You can't do it all the time, unfortunately.
Okay. I'm looking across the Cape then, since we're working around.
Okay.
Anything from you, Kate?
Yeah, just a quick question around public awareness. Obviously, you said you've done quite a lot of work, and we know we shouldn't put the oils and breadcrumbs, wet wipes, plastics, all the rest of it. Interesting what you were saying about the water butts, and just wondering if you've talked to the public about that, and also things like front gardens. This horrible phase for AstroTurf, the sort of importance of these even small spaces.
Yeah. That kind of sort of really is the planning side of things, isn't it? When people are paving over front gardens and turning them into driveways, block paving, and all this kind of stuff, it does make a really big difference because that water then quite often can end up sat in a big puddle on top of a manhole and just pouring through the top. So through the planning side of things, it would be great if local planning authorities could look at the sort of side of things a little bit more than the surface water management side when developers are putting their plans together. It's something that should be given a lot of consideration. But on that sort of water butt side of things, I mentioned Fairford, and that's something where we are going to be doing a bit of a community pilot. That's with a group I think called FWAG. I think you've come across before. So Jenny Phelps over there is helping us with that. But it is a pilot. We'll see where it goes, and we'll see how much of a difference it makes, and how much of a buy-in there is from the residents. But hopefully, it should be a helpful piece.
Okay, and also the fact that a lot of people don't realise you're supposed to have planning permission now to put this block paving, etc. That's the sort of thing perhaps you send out literature, don't you, to customers, or is it all online?
We don't really have any. We are very little say in planning, I'm afraid.
No, but it's awareness. You could put something in your literature that goes through everybody's door, just letting them know, are you aware you're supposed to have planning permission, and are you aware of the effect of keeping your front garden, however small, etc., and of having water butts, and perhaps even letting people know that if it's a rainy season, if it's not, if there's a storm coming, perhaps to let that water go in the water butts over a few days before, so that because in the winter obviously the water butts are full, aren't they? And there's exactly.
So we were actually trialling that with Buckinghamshire County Council, looking at smart water butts which will drain themselves when we know a storm's coming. So that's a fairly big scheme where we're looking to put about 5,000 water butts in. Again, it is a trial similar to what Hugh said. So that's one element to it. The other part about the driveways is it's a huge issue for us, particularly in urban catchments where basically the catchment gets up growing, but internally with all these high-standing areas. Just as a point, I suppose, is that I've actually, as a personal issue, raised that with my own council about some of my neighbours, and they're not willing to act on it. So I think we can definitely see what we can do to kind of emphasise what people should be doing. It's just then we also need councils to enforce if people are, because most people unfortunately won't apply for planning application or for redoing their driveway.
I appreciate that. Just the education does help.
Doesn't it? Absolutely.
And there's other really simple things that people can do that do help. If you know there's a storm coming, or if it's actually throwing it down outside, don't put your washing machine on, because you're just putting more water into the system. And just little things like that. It's all just helpful stuff. And even if it doesn't make a vast difference to that actual store, it's just getting into people's heads to understand about behaviours. So it is all helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. Graham, anything?
Not so much a question, Chair, but it's interesting. What you're saying about water butts, because obviously I'm from the Forestine, so not part of your catchment area. But I can remember the estate where my wife came from. It was built in the 40s, and it quite struck me that it was all those houses had water butts, quite large corrugated water butts. And I thought I've never seen it done since. We've obviously seen Cone 4 housing in Sinniford, areas like that with green water collection for flushing and whatever, which is good. But yeah, quite interested in what you were saying about water butts. I can remember back that estate. Yeah. I think they've all been got rid of by the people who live in them now for whatever reason.
Yeah, as I say, it won't stop the impact of a long duration.
No.
They can take the top off it.
Yeah, these things were quite big. Yeah, they were quite big things. Yeah. And every house had one in that small estate. And I thought, remember that being the case. Oh, very good.
Can I just, sorry, Chair,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, why would you put your washing on when it's going to rain anyway? Don't you put your washing outside to dry? I do. But, yeah.
People just, washing
It's a
machines,
good point.
dishwashers, all these things. It's just, in the middle of the store, it doesn't help.
Hang it outside in the store.
David, yeah.
Okay. Couple of questions. So I don't know whether I'm not covered by your catchment, but I know in Cheltenham and I think Gloucester as well, but I think in other places we're currently having most of our roads dug up to have fibre broadband put in. Are you working with the companies that are doing that work to identify the areas that are being got the sort of combined sewers? So you've got foul and stormwater.
Yep.
And looking at whether you can sort of combine the works to separate out highways drainage and things like that from our sewage, which will take some of the water that doesn't need to go into the sewage treatment works out of the system, but only sort of impact the public once with digging, as it were.
So on that side of things, and it's not just with changes to sewers, but it's also putting in clean water pipes and connections and things like that. There's a mechanism called HAWK, which is the Highway Authority and Utility Companies, HAUC. And through HAWK meetings, the Highway Authority tries to coordinate us as best as we can. So we don't really know what GigaClear, dare I say, are doing or whoever. But through these meetings, there should be some oversight of who wants to do what and when, and try and put it together a bit. But the way of things, unfortunately, a lot of our investment programmes don't terribly well line up. But we do exploit these things where we can. But that is the kind of the Heineken way. If that that would be the best for all of us, wouldn't it? But the HAWK meetings do try and make that happen where they can.
Okay. I'd also say on that point that most of these catchments in Gloucestershire are separate systems, so they may act like they're combined, but they're actually separate. It's just that over time, a lot of people's roofs or pavements get into. It's not so much the point, the road that's the problem. It's where the water is landing. Misconnectivity is there, not in the road.
Then looking at the actual CSOs where they are, what do you do to, if anything, to notify downstream users to look at what sensitive locations are downstream, and if you have things like community investment funds to actually help tackle those issues? So as an example, exactly downstream of a CSO in the division I represent is a park.
Yeah.
And it's obviously not your company, but that's a sensitive use because you get kids and dogs in the water who probably don't realise that it's highly contaminated. And are you providing money, or how do you warn people downstream that there's sewage in their water pools? Identify those sensitive locations, and actually are you funding the likes of councils, so our second tier authorities that manage parks and other sensitive users downstream of that, where that pollution is going to have a real impact?
Yeah.
So at the moment we don't generally notify. We've only been learning that ourselves since putting in ventilation monitors on our overflows over the last couple of years. So since 2019 and 2020, since 2019, we've been putting in these ventilation monitors, as you mentioned, on the CSO. These are providing us with information we've never had before, so it's being used at the moment to try and figure out what we should be doing as a business to better inform the public. So we're actually trialling that at the moment in Oxford. We have 6 locations around Oxford that's been used as a trial because they're going for bathing water designation, and we're working with Surfers Against Sewage, so it's on their app now as well. So we are trialling that. It is going successfully so far, but the intent is to roll that out for all other consented overflows by the end of 2022. So our CEO has made that commitment. We will obviously try to do it much sooner than that if we can. At the moment, it's a very manual process, and we need to make it automated so that it can roll out to the 550 odd overflows that we have consented across our region. So in the near future, we'll be in a position to notify people that can sign up to individual locations, and that will then hopefully enable them to make a more informed decision about using the water course. In terms of not compensation, but in terms of what's the right word? Rectifying the issue, I suppose. These notifications will allow us to also trigger cleanups, so that if we have a prolonged notification, we will then be able to instigate our own contractors to go and clean up the sewer in case clean up the water course in case there's debris, wet wipes, those sort of things, so that they can kind of put it right. And we also do have a community investment funding application process, which is available for small councils, small environmental groups or councils to apply for. But it's not something we proactively. If there's a spill, we give money out. That's just not how it's worked in the past.
Running through, you were talking about the targets, obviously, for 2050. Is that sort of linear, or are you trying to make it? Are you going to try and front load as much as you can, as soon as you can? You know, what's the sort of date for when you're going to try and get particular standards?
Yeah. So that's being figured out as we speak, basically. So we have internally spills working groups trying to figure out that exact question. Or sorry, I should say that exact answer. I would imagine, given the huge interest in this space, we would want to front end load it. But it's always going to come down to what funding we're allowed from our regulator to be able to do that. So in the past, we've never actually had this data to ask for funding to fix it. Now that we know about the state of affairs, I suppose, we will, in the next business plan that we're putting together at the moment, make that a big part of our business plan that we want to clean it up. There's a huge amount of pressure, there's a huge amount of interest in doing it, so hopefully we will get the support from our regulator to fund these activities. But our current business plan, we 3-4 billion down on what we wanted from an Ofwat wouldn't allow it, so we are reliant on Ofwat allowing us the funding to do it. So we're hoping with the Environment Act that might almost enable it to happen, because it's now law.
Final question, and I think the answer is you don't pay a dividend at the moment, do you?
No. We haven't done for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years in a row.
Because you're investing in the tunnel under the Thames in London.
But the dividend gets reinvested into business, I believe, so that any profit is just reinvested into fixing these issues. That's when it goes for at least 4 years.
Yeah.
I was going to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just ask one other?
Yeah.
Just one final thing, just come to my mind. Obviously, you've had the new Environment Bill came out last week, much controversy around that.
Yeah.
What differences will that make to you?
I mean, I think we hope that it will change. Tim mentioned earlier about our regulator, but the view from government and therefore through DEFRA, our regulator, about what we can spend money on, and it will help us invest more money. So bills will probably go up. There's been a big drive for a very, very long time by the regulator to keep bills as low as possible for very good reasons, all sorts of reasons. But I think there is a huge expectation from the public that the industry changes. And I think that the Environment Bill will be a big part of the mechanism behind that.
Okay.
I'm looking to Susan in case Susan's got any questions.
Thank you, Chair. But I think actually Councillor
Simple,
Wellens has already asked my question with regard to indicating of replacing and removing all the build-up in the wipes, etc. So the questions that I had have actually already been answered.
Thank you. I've got one because part of the plan or part of our strategy, and I'm going to ask the question: do you have any plans for creating more riverside bathing waters, swimming, fishing, recreation? Because we are looking at raising the standard, I would say, probably in Gloucestershire, wherever we can. Because at the moment, apart from South Surrey, I think we've got nowhere else we can advocate safe swimming.
Yeah. So on that side of things, most of the rivers in sort of Cotswold part of the catchment where we are, they are fairly smallish rivers compared to maybe the Wye or the Severn.
Yeah.
We do, Tim mentioned earlier, we do have a sort of a community fund that if there is a scheme, someone wants to build something, we could certainly have that conversation. But at the same time, we are not, how can I put it, the owners of the riverbank. But we would be interested, to have that conversation if someone wanted to do something. Certainly, see what can be done. But I wouldn't want to confuse the issue by suggesting, as I say, that we own the riverbanks, because that's more of a riparian issue or potentially authority, environment agency. We're the pipes. I think it's probably fair to say, but when it goes into the river, if there are problems, we have done things in the past with communities, yes.
Thank you. Yes, said we only allowed 40 minutes per water company, and we've reached that. But I'm happy to extend if there are other questions from members. We don't get these opportunities very often, but if there's any other questions from members, yes, David.
Sort of thinking about the ecology side of things. If there are groups that want to, obviously the EA does the monitoring where it does it. But if there are groups that want to sort out or actually do the monitoring of the ecology downstream of that, whether it's friends of parks groups or what have you, is that something that can be funded through the community fund? It's just obviously you don't know what's coming out of these things. Most of it's going to be stormwater, but there will be some pretty horrible stuff. And if people are putting, it's what lurks there. And it's just, it's understanding how long it's in the environment for, what damage it's doing, and how other people, if the water companies aren't going to do it, are they going to fund other people to actually tackle the ecological issues that are being caused?
So we're actually doing something at the moment with the Rivers Trust. So we work quite closely with catchment partnerships, so the rivers groups essentially. And we're working with the Rivers Trust at the moment to provide funding to the Rivers Trust to distribute out water sampling kit to each of the catchment partnerships. So in the Thames region, there's 27 catchment partnerships. For here, I guess it's the Even Load, Upper Thames,
Windrush.
There'll be a few dotted around this region. And we will facilitate them to have free access to more sampling kit than they're able to get at the moment. So I suppose that's part of it. That really comes down to long-term monitoring of rivers, really, ultimately, because that just generally is done. The EA over the years have cut back on that, unfortunately, so it's very hard to get a baseline health of the river, and that's what we're learning with the Oxford Rivers project that we're doing. As I mentioned before, we're actually doing 12 months worth of bacterial water quality monitoring to help inform their bathing water application. And it's a real eye-opener for us, as well as the Rivers Trust who we're working with on that, because at the moment the correlation between spills and high levels of bacteria isn't that clear, so we're as interested as well about where are these influxes of high bacteria coming from if it's not from overflows. It could be agricultural runoff, it could be highways runoff, it could be land drainage, it could be a number of different things, septic tanks, boats, it could be a number of different things.
Misconnections as well.
Yeah, misconnections, absolutely, yes. We've identified a few of those as well by doing this monitoring. So, yeah, I think we fully acknowledge we want to better understand what proportion of the problem, if there is one, is on us as a water company, and then what other issues are there in the catchment. So, yes, we're willing to support, and we're doing that with Rivers Trust on. So I would point any environmental group like the Friends or anything to their local catchment partnership, because we'll be providing funding via them.
Okay. Nick, you indicated with a quick one.
Just one minute, so I know we're over time. Just one last one from me. So, as sort of Paul mentioned earlier, so if 2050, so we're talking 30 odd years, is the target for zero pollution levels, and you've alluded to the lining process having very little success so far in the areas you've targeted in terms of literally very little to no impact. Are there any other large plans in addition to this lining plan that you've got in place to hit that target? Because if that's the only plan, it's from targets, and the pilots have very little success, it would seem that that's quite an ambitious target.
So I think the two biggest other elements are the fact that we will be upgrading a number of our treatment works in terms of their treatment capacity and their storm capacity, so that they're able to treat more, so they can pump more treated effluent out, and they're able to hold more flow so that they're not spilling. So that's one big part of it, as you mentioned before. The other part is our surface water management plan, which is a fairly big, ambitious program that we've got. We started it in our last business plan, which was to disconnect 20 hectares away from our sewer network. Our current business plan, our target is 65 hectares, and we expect that to continue to keep almost doubling each AMP. So next investment period, we're expecting that to be about 130 hectares that we're going to take away from our sewer network. So that for us is the most sustainable approach. If we can stop rainwater where it lands from going any further, then that seems to be the most successful thing for us. We obviously need to work very closely with councils to ensure that it's not going to go anywhere it's not wanted, into land drainage or highway drainage or places like that. But for us, that seems to be the approach the industry as a whole is taking, is surface water management. And we're actually partnering up with, I don't think they're in your regions, but Cherwell District Council and Vale White Horse and Oxfordshire County Council. We're doing a strategic partnership with them where we've given them £3 million to spend in those three regions as a trial. And we do expect, if that trial is successful, we will continue funding councils to do some of this stuff. Because we recognise the benefit that councils get from this work as well as we get indirectly. The council gets a much more regenerated area. It's basically what London has been doing for the last 15 years. Councils like Enfield are real front runners in the space, and they're putting in wetlands and every opportunity they can get. And if we're the mechanism, if we're the funding route, great, but we get a huge benefit from it as well. So I think we'll upgrade our treatment works, we'll upgrade our works to treat more, to hold more, and also to stop it going any further from the point of where it lands is our long-term ambition.
Okay. Looking around. Thank you. We've got overrun by about 5 minutes, but I'm not overly worried about that. I'm just concerned about the next speaker. Can I thank you both for attending? This is being streamed, so no doubt it will be saved. I'm a bit worried about the acoustics in here. It's not quite what I would have wanted, and we might move a few around in a moment before the next speaker, because I was struggling to pick on some answers, and in fairness, I think Paul was as well. But thank you for your time. Thank you for the advance information, and thank you for making the effort to attend. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do you want to go back where Nick is first? welcome.
Good afternoon.
And sorry about the slight overrun, but I'll give you the same opportunity. I'm sure the last speaker probably wouldn't worry about waiting the extra 5 minutes. Thank you for what you've sent in advance. We now have names around. I'm not going to ask members to introduce themselves because anybody that plays this back will be able to work out where their individual member is from. I want to save some time if possible. Also, of course, there was a list of questions sent out. We departed from that quite well in the last session, and I'm perfectly happy that members take that format this time. Since you're Severn Trent, you'll probably get more questions from those in what we would call the Severn Trent area, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so we'll kick it off with the first question anyway, which is what actions do you have to tackle both cleaning up existing and stopping future river pollution and associated timescales for these? And that's not a bad kick-off question, but I'll let you answer that and then we'll follow whatever format members wish to continue in. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Chris Giles. I look after Severn Trent's pipes, customers and its people on the waste side of our business. So this is absolutely at the heart of what we do, which is looking after the environment and also protecting people's homes from flooding. So thanks for the questions in advance, and I will just pull out some of the salient points and happy to take a question on anything this afternoon or come back to you with any specifics. So as in terms of taking action to tackle, I guess, river quality, it's hot. I presume the previous company talked about the reasons for not achieving good status, which is the Environment Agency's method of assessing river quality. Do I need to cover that at all, or might just be a helpful? Do you want me to just give a 1 minute overview?
Yeah, please.
So the Environment Agency measure kind of river quality, and they look at a range of parameters, so chemical parameters, things like phosphorus, nitrogen, etc. And also just clocked to them and talking about ecological surveys. That is something that also will be undertaken. And they actually then take an assessment, kind of a standard methodology of all watercourses, so rivers that the EA look after. And then they assign reasons for not achieving a good standard. And then they give a report for each water length that talks around those reasons. So when we're kind of talking about what we're doing to improve river quality, our kind of investment approach is very much grounded in that. It's kind of scientifically based with the information that the EA provide. So in terms of looking at Gloucestershire, there were 251 RNAGs, so those reasons why rivers haven't met good standard, across the 42 separate water bodies in Gloucestershire. So by sector, the issues were 116 of those were agricultural and land management related, 41 were urban and transport, 40 were the water industry, and I'll talk through what we're doing around ours shortly. 16, they didn't actually find at the time any assignable sectors, they may have been a mix of courses that will need further investigation. 14 are directly related to industries, that will be specific outputs from certain industrial sectors. And then there's a kind of variety of things like you were talking about misconnections earlier that are probably making up the difference. So in terms of 40, which are Severn Trent kind of RNAGs, those reasons why those watercourses didn't meet good status, 18 of those we actually already have measures in place to address, and that's mostly during this 5-year period. So that's an asset management plan, this 5 years, which is good. And then 16 of those we're undertaking investigations to put into AMP8, so that's 2025 to 2030. And we've also had a look, and we believe 6 of those through investigation are not actually associated with our activities. So we've got a plan for 18, we're building a plan for 16, and we believe the rest aren't associated with Severn Trent's permitted activities. There is one that's a suspected RNAG at Wickester's Brook, just south of Stroud, and we're also confident that isn't a Severn Trent issue, as we don't have any assets or overflows that actually spill into that watercourse. And in terms of the time question, we're looking to resolve all of our reasons for not achieving good status by 2030 through this AMP's investment period, this 5 years, and next 5 years investments. That's what we're focusing all of our energies onto. And again, we do a huge amount on kind of protecting the environment, and hopefully have pulled a few of those items out of the pre-read documentation.
Did you have a question, Nick?
Can I come back to me in a minute? I'll just
sorry?
come back to me in a minute.
Yeah. Kate, yeah.
Thanks. Hi. You mentioned in here you've got the 251 RNAGs spread across 42 separate water bodies. Can we have a breakdown of who those 42 separate water bodies are?
Yes, I can give you the data. So you like kind of the RNAG per the data water.
Yeah, just a bit more information. And this sort of 16 with no sector responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Could we have a bit more information on that? I'm just finding that through the sessions we've had, that quite often we'll have the EA and they'll say, well, that's somebody else's, and then you've got the water companies and that's somebody, and then it's the councils, and then it's industry, agriculture. Little bit of ping pong, I guess I call it. So if we can have more information on what we're actually dealing with, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay, more than happy to provide that. So we do use the EA's own, it's kind of the data that's published, so it'll be what's ready and available, and I guess publicly available information. I think it is a holistic issue when you look at river quality. So just as that example there, you've got agriculture and land management, so kind of whether that's intensive agriculture for things like livestock and manures, which can then wash into rivers and water bodies, whether that's things like putting out fertilisers and pesticides. We've also got industries kind of directly connected, they'll have their own permits through the Environment Agency. I think you mentioned earlier, I heard the conversation about kind of highway drainage. There's lots of inputs into river quality, and I think our view would be the best way of doing that is we'll do our part to reduce that, and actually we should be driving to having good standards in all of our rivers, obviously in Gloucestershire, but also any that we collectively look after.
Yeah, I don't envy you, because it is a huge responsibility, as you say. It's holistic, and there's the public in there and then various other bodies. It's just really hard trying to swim through all that, if you like. To find out what we actually need to do to improve it, because it just goes round on a big belt of, well, that bit's not ours, and then that, do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, I think the
frustrating.
to be kind of straight to the point, a real kind of national strategy on that. So we're absolutely committed to doing our part. Actually, we reduced our RNAGs by 10% in the last year alone, and we want to drive that to zero. So all of our activities are permitted by the EA. We're really focused on our standards, and we are driving improvement, and you can see that in our performance and data. Unfortunately, there has been, I guess, river quality standards, the progress has stalled. So all of the efforts of the water industry have unfortunately been taken out of agriculture in the last few years. So I think we do need that holistic strategy, but the RNAG data does give most kind of visibility of where those inputs are coming from by water body. And if we all address those, we've got a real opportunity to improve river quality.
Thank you. I've got David, and then I'll come to you, and then I'll come back to Nick.
Yeah.
David.
Hi, David.
Hi. So I'm going to move to use the example that I'm most familiar with, which is the Arle CSO, which is in the division I represent. So it's in St Peter's Park, it's just upstream of St Peter's Park, which I guess there's a couple of questions which you may have heard. So just downstream of this combined sewer overflow is a park, managed by Cheltenham Borough Council, who are the riparian owner of this. So the first sort of question on this is, how do you notify downstream users when there's been an incident? Because ultimately, I'm pretty sure that my constituents, their kids and their dogs, are wandering in a river, potentially shortly after pollution events. I wouldn't do it because I know it was upstream, but how do we make people aware of that when an incident's happened?
Absolutely. So we would like to share all of our information. So we currently put that and make it available each year. We need to get to as close to real time as we can on that. So again, we are looking at how we would do that. As part of the green recovery investment, we've actually got 2 sections of river we're working on towards going to bathing river status or bathing water status. And as part of that, we're looking at the technologies to take the information from the sensors at those outfalls, to kind of process that and to be able to make that available. So we know that works well on areas of the coastline where companies that have coastal outfalls actually provide that information so people can assess kind of water quality. We want to be doing that for our rivers. We're quite early, to be honest, in the journey of putting sensors on the outfalls. but we absolutely intend to do that. So we're investing in the technology, we're working that through, and then we'll be able to make that available. We're also trialling a few things in terms of whether there are some not perfect solutions, but we can maybe bring more near-time information to make that available in a couple of areas. So it is very much our intent to do that. I think the decision on kind of entering that water, I would still always recommend people use good hygiene practices, because I think it's absolutely right. And from a water company's perspective in Severn Trent, would of course want to do more in this space. There are lots of inputs to river quality that may not be from sewerage or from water companies that can actually cause a health risk or hazard. So I'd recommend hygiene practices, and that's kind of where going down the bathing rivers piece, that looks at holistically at water quality, the right samplings in place, and then you can have the right informed decision on whether to safely enter the water or not.
Okay. Sort of coming a bit back to this, we obviously talked about the water that goes into the river during overflow times. As I said, it's just upstream of the park. It's also reasonably close to a residential area. What do I and others that have got similar facilities in their divisions need to do to get you to put odour control measures on the combined sewer overflow? So effectively, the combined sewer overflow is a concrete dip in the river that's probably about the size of that and goes back further than I can see, probably the length of a football pitch, so you can't shine a torch into it. And in the summer, in half ripe, I can't see that there's any odour control in there, but the smell of sewage is not ideal when you're walking in a park. So, and I don't think that this is likely to be an isolated problem. So how do we get, who do we talk to in Severn Trent, and who've got similar issues in their areas that they serve, to get odour control put on there?
Just so I understand the kind of question, so there's a variety of size of overflows, and you're right, they operate during kind of rainfall conditions. At this overflow, sounds like quite a large one. So in the summertime, if there's any debris at all left in there, is that then causing an odour for the park or residents?
I assume that it's, I haven't got into it, I know people have. There was at one point someone homeless who got in there and was leaving in there. Don't ask. So I assume that it is just a very large underground storage reservoir for sewage with some sort of overflow that's triggered when the volume of foul water in there reaches that point. And I think it's just effectively an open sewer down a long, dark hole, and that there isn't really anything to prevent the odour coming out. And that's why there's a problem. From the point of view of things that I would consider, I work in IT, we have data centres where they separate the cold air and the hot air by hanging a thick plastic curtain, and that keeps the two sets of air separate. And if it's capable of keeping hot and cold apart, it's probably capable of keeping the smell in and also allowing floodwater to flow underneath. There may be other solutions, but it's not pleasant for people having the smell of sewage in a park.
No, I absolutely understand that, David. And generally, there's loads of different types of overflows. They're generally designed so when they kind of the main sewers are full, so that's kind of part of the underground network, they'll spill in gravity to the water, which is mostly kind of rainwater. They're normally designed to be self-cleansing, so the actual flow when it rains cleanses the pipe. In this instance, I don't know the specifics, but I'm happy to get the teams locally to have a look. They'll generally be pretty clean afterwards, and we send our teams out to inspect and maintain those assets on a routine basis, so I can absolutely get the local network technicians to have a look at this location. The other thing we're doing is investing in a team of river rangers that will work with any community groups, whether that's in rivers and parks, etc., to kind of explain our assets and to work with individuals or groups on any of these types of issues. So yeah, we can introduce things like extra cleansing activities, cleanse it if it's very hot over a period of time, and sort of look at some specific engineering solutions.
And just finally, well, I've got two more. So community funds. I know you have a community fund. Is this something that Cheltenham Borough Council, which owns the park and is downstream, beneficiary, no, that's not the right word, but the downstream experiencer of some of the issues. Is that something that they can bid into for that park to your community fund? Because I think there's sort of the large organisations, there seem to be sort of hundreds of thousands available for particular projects, and that would make a huge difference to the people I represent. Is that something that's viable, or is it only charities that?
No, absolutely, we can have a look at that. So we've got it's kind of our social kind of community funds. We put essentially our profit into that fund for people to access, and I can put you in touch, and I'll get our lead for our River Rangers team, if that would work, David, to kind of pick that up and explore what are the opportunities around that. It is a kind of independent panel that look at each of the cases that come forward for that investment and that contribution, but we can certainly take a look.
Okay. And the final question, which I also asked Thames, but your dividend payments to shareholders last year, I think I had it down as 228.4 million. Is that approximately right?
Yes, we did make dividend payments last year. I will give you the exact figure. So on average, we've looked at it over a 5-year basis and prior period of time. Just get that. Okay, so we actually paid 64 million last year, and over a 5-year average, it's 187 million pounds. That's it is massively outweighed kind of by the efficiency gains in the sector, so it's 60% more efficient since privatisation. And we do spend an awful amount on investing in our networks, which is kind of well over the amount of dividends that are provided.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, thank you. When you started off, you said, just to quote you, what we're about is protecting the environment. A little bit sort of surprised you said that, because in 2019, Severn Trent discharged on 39,938 occasions untreated raw sewage into English rivers, which is huge. How does that square with your statement that's protecting the environment? And also, how do you square it with the fact that Thames Water in the same period were only discharging on 1,600 occasions?
So I think there's a range of things going on there. So we are absolutely passionate about protecting and improving the environment, and our investment and activities have demonstrated that over quite a period of time. We're investing 1.2 billion improving the environment over this AMP period. The storm overflows that you're talking about that have spilled to the environment during wet weather, that's absolutely a legacy challenge. So if I could go back in time, maybe 50 years longer, I'd talk to the engineers building these systems and ask them to separate out rainwater and sewage. So they are there really as a relief valve to stop people's homes, gardens and businesses from flooding. We wouldn't build the network like that today. We wouldn't have combined systems, and we certainly wouldn't want to mix rainwater with sewage. So yes, we do have permitted spills that go to riverways and water bodies. They're permitted by the Environment Agency. They're permitted on the river quality and the local parameters that are there. And obviously we would like to improve that, and we want to do our bit, and we're doing our bit in terms of river water quality. So in terms of improving those on, actually we've made a 10% reduction last year. We absolutely want to get that to zero by 2030, and we do want the kind of investment mandate to make a difference. So it is a part of what we do. We're totally reliant on the environment. My team are passionate about protecting it. We've reduced pollutions. We're going to be net zero on carbon basis by 2030. We are doing a huge amount to protect the environment, so we want to do more.
So your 2030 then, is that 2030 to eliminate all sewage overflows into the system?
No, that's to improve all
So what's
reasons
your
for not
target?
achieving. So I think there was a bit in the paper, and you would have seen hopefully the recent government reports that it could cost up to £650 billion to separate all the systems out. So if we wanted to close all storm overflows, separate the entire system to stop any of those spills from happening, that's a humongous undertaking for our company and for England. So there are kind of opportunities to improve, and clearly we will do that. I don't know if the question is how long would it take to stop all of those.
Well, what's your target?
So for river quality, 2030, we want to be there. And over the next few years, we want to reduce and improve our spills. But it needs to be targeted investment. We could make a zero promise on that, but actually that needs massive investment and might not be the best overall thing for the environment or the economy, etc. So we need some, clear steer, and we need to work with partners on total river quality to say what's the right thing to happen.
So I'm just hearing that you haven't got a target for that.
To get to zero spills, we don't have a target.
You haven't got a target. Okay. And just the final thing from me then is the bathing status. You talked about there were 2 bathing areas that you wanted. Where are they?
The River Team and the River Leam is the 2 areas that we're working on. So as part of the Green Recovery investment, we submitted a number of plans, and 2 of those was really to test out river bathing quality, like how do we approach that, how do we work with all the partners in the areas, so then we can understand that, and then if we want to do that everywhere else and customers and the regulators would support that, we could then do more. The other really big scheme that I think is really important is up at Mansfield, and we're working with local authority and communities there, and that is very much to remove rainwater and surface water for the system, and that is really for a really great green infrastructure. So things like suds and swales, more permeable surfaces, really to let the water soak into the ground or be directed straight from watercourses, not to cause flooding, and that would actually make a huge difference. Those are the type of projects, yes, that will make a difference in the future.
How would we get one in Gloucestershire then? If we aspire to that, how would we do that?
We would, of course, we're really hoping that these 2 schemes have a big benefit, and then we'll be looking to work with communities, customers, partners and councils for where there's demand for those types of bathing rivers, and then if that's supported by customers, our stakeholders and our regulators, that's when we can look to invest to make that difference. So it'll be very much part of the next plan going into, it's called Price Review 24. That's for the years 2025 to 2030. And again, I can put you in touch with our kind of regulatory team and we could start that conversation. We've got to prove that those things work effectively during this AMP period first.
Thank you. I've got Nick, then Kate again, and I think Graham indicated. Yeah, Nick.
Thank you. Yeah, it's sort of a follow-on from Paul's point, really, and it's disappointing to hear that there's no target set to stop discharging. Do you have any plans to reduce the numbers of discharges that you're currently taking? And given that your figures are kind of twice as high as other competitors, I'm just trying to understand why you're discharging twice as much, and yet, unlike the others, you have no plans to actually stop. I can't quite work that out.
Okay, so we do have a lot of discharges when you look at the numbers. That's really about the size of geography that we look after, and also we are a kind of landlocked company. We have no coastline, so we've got a different infrastructure. That kind of legacy infrastructure that was installed has more storm overflows by its nature. So you have to look at the number of properties connected, the geography, which then leads to the number of spills, which are driven really by rainfall and the asset base that we look after. So we absolutely appreciate that we have a number of spills and we want to reduce those over time. I think fundamentally we want to improve river water quality, and to do that we use the kind of RNAG data, which is the reasons why they're not achieving good status.
Yeah, sorry,
That's
to stop you. I completely understand your points on river quality. I'm not getting into that. What I'm trying to understand is, as a company, you're discharging and dumping sewage twice as much as other competitors, and I can't forget about river quality for a minute. I cannot understand why, as a company, you're doing it twice as much as others. You can talk about being landlocked, but there's obviously a historical reason why it seems to be the go-to for your company in comparison to others. I'm just trying to understand why that is. I'm not talking about river water quality.
When we normalise the data by things like pipe length or number of properties served, we are not the second worst or the second most in terms of spillers. We're very much around the average. So I guess it's looking at how do you compare like for like. So there are some kind of small wastewater or WASC, so water and waste companies, and there's some very large companies. We're the second largest, and we do have more of an asset base and we serve more customers. When you compare it down, we're not the second worst performer.
So just to come back,
we do want to improve river quality. That will mean some reduction in spills in areas. That'll be targeted investment at the kind of right locations to make the biggest difference.
So just to come back to my follow-on, and then I'll let somebody else speak. So am I right in thinking that improving river quality overall, that there are no specific plans to help reduce with dumping that?
So in terms of our activities, yes, there are plans and investment to improve quality, which will reduce either the number of spills or improve the water that comes out of
sewage. So the ones that are specifically to reduce spills, what are they?
specific schemes.
No, the ones that are specifically to reduce spills. You said there are some.
Yes.
What are they?
So there'll be things like capacity increases. So we will build bigger pipes in certain locations. We'll build bigger tanks and activities. We'll protect the network. I think there's conversation about lining sewers. There's a whole range of investments that are targeted at locations to improve quality or reduce spills. So it can give you some specifics for the Gloucestershire
That'd be great.
area if you'd like in terms of projects.
Yes, please.
Give you some stats. Okay, so in terms of overall, so we are upgrading a third of our total sewage treatment works over the next kind of between 2015 and 2025. We're investing 1.2 billion this AMP period in the environment and the additional 566 million on green recovery projects. In Gloucestershire and Worcestershire counties, we've got 43 active investment schemes, so that's totalling 58.6 million, and 20 of these projects are related to capacity improvements. That'll be increasing the capacity of the network and sewage treatment works, so there'll be less spills and it'll help for an environmental improvement quality. We've got 60 sewage works operating in Gloucestershire. So there's a whole range of things that we're doing. Actually, we've brought 2 schemes forward for phosphate, which is one of those river chemicals, both at Coley and Wincoln Works, and that's actually brought forward from next AMP period. So there's a range of different projects and solutions that are going on to improve river quality and protect the environment.
Thank you.
Kate.
Thanks. Yeah, I only asked question 1 because we were on number 1, isn't it? Anyway. Number 6, talking about twinning. Slightly concerned that it talks about prioritising investment. The issue is, there's sort of regular sewage in the street, and I appreciate you have to sort of think about people's homes first. Can I give the constituents who asked me the information you've put here, that you've sent to us, because obviously it says confidential, sensitive, can I relay that there is a project looking at that?
Absolutely, and I think the teams have been to the parish council meetings to talk through that. So yeah, we have a scheme in flight. There is a hydraulic or capacity related problem of some description they're investigating. Once they're through feasibility, we then understand how big a solution, what does it look like, and we can commit to doing something.
Is that something that they could apply to the community fund for?
Not specifically, because that would be kind of our base investment in our assets. So it's not a community project. That would be for us to resolve based on the drivers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, we are having more and more constituents talking about sewage coming up in gardens and things like that. And Northway, which it's next door to my constituency, but people, coming to us and talking about this, and it does need addressing, doesn't it? It does worry me that prioritising investment, i.e. there isn't enough money. A couple of other questions. And the Rivers Rangers team, I think that's really good and that's positive. And can you send information to the relevant councillors if you've got these teams up and running? Because it would be something that I think a lot of us would want to be involved in. And again, it's putting all these agencies together. So
absolutely.
Is that something that you can take away?
If I can ask if I could be provided with the best kind of contact list, I can absolutely provide those. And actually, Gareth, who runs the team, is based very locally, so I'm sure he'd be happy to meet anyone and talk that through.
Okay, great. A couple more. The dividends, it's interesting how Thames Water don't use those anymore. They actually reinvest all of their profits. So is that something you can look at, please?
I think we're probably in very different positions in terms of Thames and ourselves, in terms of their performance and the reasons why they're reinvesting.
It's just that got quite a few thumbs up and we were quite pleased with that, and it would be great to see that elsewhere, because obviously that's been in the media quite recently, hasn't it, particularly? And if we're short of the money needs to go back into the infrastructure and whatever else we need to do in order to address these problems, rather than
Costs are going to work.
Yeah, and just
Massively.
we invested actually kind of more than our TOTEX allowance, so we're allowed a set amount of funding to invest in our network and infrastructure. And as a company, we did invest more than that the last AMP period, and we'll continue to invest effectively for infrastructure network to do major changes of this nature, maybe it's eradicating all overfills. That's a very different setup, and clearly we need support.
So will the new Environment Act will change that? You'll be able to invest more, will you?
I think we hope so, in terms of it seems the right thing to do. We will always follow the law, no ifs, no buts, and I think a clear steer from government on that will hopefully allow us to invest in doing the right thing and actually improving river quality. And again, I do think we need a kind of joined up strategy on that, because we can do a huge amount in the water sector. And as we've seen recently, actually, we're making gains, but we're seeing that eroded by other sectors. So if we had a joined up plan, I think we could really make a difference. But yes, it's obviously it's a step in the right direction.
And then to Paul's question about bathing, and it's looking at bathing standards, looking at where people want them. How are you going to balance that with, we can't have bathing waters suitable for bathing everywhere, because then you have the problems with ecology. So we want some bathing waters, but we don't want them everywhere. So how are you going to address that if everybody starts wanting wild swimming, etc.?
I think we really need really good stakeholder kind of collaboration on that. We need to identify areas which really are suitable for bathing rivers, where the communities would like those. We need to prove the kind of concept and the approach, and then we can have a look at where else would they need to be. But I think the community plays a huge role, and I think they've probably got great ideas in all the areas we look after, where that would make sense and perhaps where it wouldn't.
So yeah, so you're going to have to balance that
absolutely
carefully. Okay, and then just really education, which was mentioned to the previous water company, about letting people know about water butts and all the rest of it, and that they have to have planning. So is that something that you can send out? Because the public are aware of not putting wet wipes, and well, they're not overly aware, but they have been told, haven't they? And oil, etc., down the drains. So is that something that you can get out to your customers with your online and your paper copies? You know,
definitely. I think doing a huge amount on customer education and engagement. So through all channels, so websites, letter, emails, media. And we have created a team called the Network Protection Team that will also go out and talk to community groups, but also go to doorsteps where we've got things like unflushables as a problem, whether that's wet wipes, whether it's fat soils and greases. We'll go and talk to communities, homeowners and businesses about what not to put down the drains. And that's actually been really powerful. So a lot of kind of awareness material does make a big difference. And actually we reached 6 million of our customers over the last year with a kind of message around what not to flush, and only flush into 3 P's, so pee, poo and paper, which I'm sure you've heard me say before, or certainly heard our sector say before. But also that direct engagement on the doorstep makes a huge difference, and we've definitely seen that with our network protection teams. We've also done a huge amount on multi-language campaigns, so we have all of our literature in 16 different languages. We're really targeting that into different communities because it is really important. On things like water butts, you can get a water butt off our website for a kind of lower cost. There's lots of things that we do in terms of trying to get the right things down the sewers, keep the wrong things out, and absolutely I think there's lots more we can do as well with some support.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The question I got is, I mean, what is Severn Trent doing to prevent this untreated sewage running into the community? Because we start to see it in these very severe storms, much more frequent. The area obviously covers the Forest of Dean. We got a village there, Rusbridge, where that village straddles very steep hillsides, and on those hillsides, we got the situation, as you know yourself, with crossover because of the older houses, their roofs and whatever go into the sewer systems rather than separate storm systems. And what that does is blows lids off Severn Trent systems. And then we got raw sewage cascading down through the village. This is happening quite frequent now on these very severe storms. When the engineers came out, some of the residents asked, well, you know, what do you think about it? And the engineer said, well, the system's inadequate. There's nothing we can do about it. But surely on these acute hillsides, I know you can't do everything overnight, don't get me wrong, and there's a large problem with that sort of thing all across the country. But in these acute hillside villages and places where it's actually blowing lids off, quite heavy drains, and raw sewage is running through people's gardens, have we got any plans to tackle that first and maybe get to the real bad ones first?
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, we've kind of halved the amount of sewer flooding. So I've seen a 50% reduction in the last 7 years, and it is something we're absolutely passionate about. So we do prioritise investment. So any call to Severn Trent for sewer flooding, where it's kind of coming out of a manhole, we'll send a team out. And the team that might arrive might not be able to absolutely solve that if it's a capacity issue. So there's just too much rainwater going into the system, causing it to spot. What they will do is check the pipe, so CCTV, kind of put a camera down, check that it is clear, so there's no things like baby wipes, debris, that type of thing, so at least it's at maximum capacity. And then our catchment lead teams who look after each kind of cluster or network of pipes will start modelling that network to say, well, there's enough capacity but there's some sort of restriction in the network, do we need to add new capacity, or is there some sort of operational issue? I talked around prioritisation earlier. They'll take all that information and basically create a list of priorities. So it's kind of protect people's homes, gardens, kind of communities of that view, and then we'll invest to fix that. Unfortunately, we can't invest in everything overnight to make a difference. But yes, if people are reporting those issues, we will be looking at those and building up that kind of investment, basically list that we'll work through to do that. And it's really difficult, particularly with the intensity of some of the storms that we see with things like climate change, etc. More development, more concrete over areas, which means it's more flashy when the rain does hit. And actually, there is also designed with a finite amount of capacity. So some storms will just exceed the capacity that is available. And again, that's where we work very heavily with the legal local flood authority, other risk management agencies around flooding to kind of talk about what's the best solution for those areas. So absolutely we're doing our bit, and we will work with other parties and do that where there's problems. Because things like surface water problem where it never even gets into the sewer, it is a big issue as well, and that's a multi-agency problem that we'll work through.
I don't know whether you all do anything this way, but Thames made a comment just now. They're looking at smart water butts and whatever for houses where their roofs drain into the sewer system. But these things empty themselves after a severe rain slowly, which I thought was quite good. There was a I can remember estates being built in the Forestine vicinity. I remember being there. I can't remember it being built. Who built the forest? But all those council estates had water butts. Actually built each house had a water butt. So they were doing it then. Yeah. For whatever reason, that was lost. Over the years. But do you have any plans that way to look at that sort of technology?
We've definitely. So what we do, we have water butts done at a reduced rate on our website, etc. That's something we'd absolutely encourage. But yeah, any way of keeping rainwater out of the system is a brilliant idea. And the smart water butts are really quite clever because they will release over a period of time. They're great because you don't have to use tap water to water your flowers and those things. So we'd hugely encourage that. And actually, there's a lot of clever, innovative solutions that can keep rainwater out. So in Mansfield, we have a whole range of green solutions. So we can actually keep that out, and that's both at a domestic kind of property level, but also in terms of the kind of roads, paths, drainages, working with businesses, green roofs. There's a lot that can be done to do that. And I think we're using a lot of innovation as well on things like smart monitors. So actually, we can understand what's happening within that sewer network. That's really important to imagine. We've got this huge network under the ground. That actually we've got no real eyes and ears in there. It's a really kind of legacy. Most of it's way over 50 years old. We're slowly putting in lots of smart sensors. Actually, this AMP period, we're putting in 40,000 new monitors that will tell us what's going on in the sewers. And that means if there's a partial blockage, so wipes and fat oils and greases, we can go and actually get there before they cause a problem for any of our customers. But also, during a storm event, we can actually see is the water even getting into the sewer? Is our sewers working perfectly and it's flooding from another source? We'll get a much better view of what's actually happening and who can actually deal with the problem. So yeah, there's a lot we can do on technology and innovation, a lot.
The other question I got was on rivers, and obviously the river in my area is the River Wye. And there have been a lot of concerns with its quality of recent in the press, as you probably know. And some say it's coming from Moda County up in the Moray region of the river with regards to farming techniques and whatever's polluting the river. But it is a concern because obviously drinking water is pumped at Bishopswood, which supplies this city, or certainly the Strode Valleys, goes to the Bishopdean treatment, which then goes down freefall then to Brookthorpe. So is there, what's Severn Trent responsible for, or is it a joint thing with Welsh Water, or?
Yeah, so I think
is there a programme to look at that situation, that river?
So the Wye itself does sit with Welsh Water's area of responsibility, and it's kind of split between the Environment Agency and National Resources. I guess just on some specifics, so in general, we do a lot of work with farmers as well. So
Yeah.
kind of working in catchment, because actually if you can stop pollutants at kind of source, it's really great, and there's some absolutely brilliant farming practices which work really well on things like nutrient management, pesticides, fertilisers, all that. That actually stop that at source, so the right amount goes on. That then doesn't leach into watercourses or kind of then into rivers. So there's some really good things that we do to improve that. And we'd encourage kind of more of that. In terms of actually taking drinking water out, so from a river we would abstract water. That will go through a really rigorous cleaning process to make sure it's absolutely at kind of really tight standards before it goes into the drinking water system. So anything we can do to improve river quality is fantastic.
Yeah.
We do a huge amount of that in certain areas, but ultimately it's the Environment Agency that measure river quality.
Yeah.
And back to, we do need, I think, a really integrated strategy so we can stop all types of pollutants or risks going into our rivers.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm realising we're getting close to our time. Sue, we've lost visual of Sue. Is she still with us up by audio?
Still with you. It's just that it keeps breaking down, so I've taken my picture off.
Okay. Have you got any questions, Sue?
No, Chair. No,
Okay.
thank you. I think most of the things that I have wanted to ask have come from Kate. Thank
well,
you.
We might get even more because Kate's indicated with another question. So.
Oh, well, that's good. I think it's just that because I'm last in asking the questions, mine have already gone. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Kate.
Okay, so just thinking about the bathing, suitability for bathing, and you're saying it's sort of coming from communities, but it might be a good piece of work from Severn Trent to actually talk to this group about where those places would be, because as individual councillors we might go and look and see in our patches, but you've got the whole of the area, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So is that something you can take away and find an area or two that you think would be the most suitable? Because surely it would be better to work that way than for everybody to come say, well, how about this one, how about this one? So for it to come from
we can certainly, again, take a look, and you're right, we'll understand some of the areas that we look after, and we can look at things like the Environment Agency's river quality data, etc. Yeah, we can help on that. So yeah, happy to do that. And again, it's probably something the new River Rangers team can take a view on. We can look at it through our investment planning cycle. But again, we need multiple inputs to say what's the right decision.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. No one else is indicating. We're just about, because I allowed that sort of 5-minute overrun. Thank you for the advance information. Thank you for being open and honest with questions, because that's all we ask of any witnesses to these sort of sessions. Thank you for the time you're given. I'm just going to ask members if they're comfortable. If not, I might take a 2-minute break before we have our final speaker, if our final speaker's up. Right. A couple of minute comfort break since we've been going 90 minutes.
Okay.
And thank you for the considerable amount of information you forwarded in advance. I think we all know Wessex is probably the smallest of the three suppliers to the county, but you do supply to the county. So, I mean, you've seen our list of questions. I'll kick off with the first one and then let members pick up as we go. So, basically, it's what actions do you have to tackle both clean up existing and stopping future river pollution for the
Sure, in the handout there, I've separated out what we're doing at our water recycling centres, which is our new name for sewage treatment works, and also storm overflows. So as part of our more holistic work, we've got our pollution reduction plan, which is available on our website, and we update that on a quarterly basis. And that shows the wider measures which we're looking at, which includes asset improvement works and also sort of the community work, understanding around sort of both misconnections and also blockages as well. One of our key areas of focus is really understanding the impact which our assets have on the environment. So we run a programme of environmental investigations and monitoring to understand where Wessex Water's operation is having the impact and where actually other sources are causing an impact. And where those investigations illustrate that it's through to our assets, then we work with the Environment Agency to include that as part of our capital investment programme in the subsequent act. So that involves a large amount of data collection and analysis, because we believe that our customers should be paying for the contributions which we make on their behalf, rather than the more holistic or societal problems which actually are going of our making. So all of our investments should be based on sound science and data and evidence.
Thank you. Paul, yes.
Yeah, thank you for that. I've just got a few questions. I've asked similar questions to the other companies, so to be fair. The fines that have been imposed on Wessex Water, I mean, do you feel that they changed the behaviour of the company in any way? And if so, in what way?
So we are the best performing water company with the greatest track record in terms of our environmental performance. We're the Environment Agency look at star ratings for companies, and we've, out of the total amount of star ratings that we achieved over the last 5 years, 20 Wessex Waters achieved 19. So we do pride ourselves on environmental performance, and we take that very seriously. In terms of fines, yes, we do. It obviously does resonate with both our shareholders and our executive as well, and we do learn from that. We've worked more recently to promote environmental enforcement undertakings rather than fines, because we believe that that's a better approach, given that the level of sort of penalty is similar to what you would expect from a fine, but actually rather than really going to the Treasury, it goes back to the local environment which has been impacted, which we believe is actually the better solution. And that has sort of in some ways challenged us to work with local groups and the environment where we have then caused an impact, and also to deliver some environmental good as a result of that. So yes, it does have an impact. Also, again, as all water companies, we're impacted by the performance of our neighbours, and particularly the media interest within that. So clearly, the Southern Water fine recently has sort of challenged all companies, I think, to understand, what is their learning from that, and how are they going to act differently perhaps in future.
Okay, thank you. I mean, in terms of targets, what's the Wessex Water target for eliminating sewage overflows altogether? So
we haven't specified a target by a particular time frame. We're one of my colleagues, Matt Wilden, is our Director of Assets and Compliance, and is the water company lead on the DEFRA Storm Overflow Task Force. So actually what we believe is that this is a collaborative approach, working with local authorities like yourselves to actually understand where we all have a part to play. So part of that is around building control, lobbying the government to change the Water Industry Act to enable the right to disconnect and discontinue the right for developers to connect in the first instance. Part of the problem with storm overflows is actually rainwater, and it's not sewage. So we're working with all parties to understand what is the sustainable solution going forward. And also, as I said earlier, we're very keen to understand our impact, and where storm overflows are having an impact, those are the ones which we will prioritise. Where they're not, much of our area is chalk groundwater, so dominated by groundwater infiltration, where actually there is no impact from those overflows, then they will be lower on the priority list. But we obviously understand it's a very emotive issue for our customers, and we are prioritising our approach going forward.
All right, thank you. And just the final question from me is about the last week's new environment bill. Obviously, that's attracted a lot of controversy. But what differences do you think that bill will make to you, if any?
So we're interested in the fact that there will be a requirement for increased monitoring to understand impact, because I think that's the bit which gets lost in translation. A lot of the focus is very much on number of spills and reducing the number of spills, and not actually focusing on the impact of those spills. So where those spills are causing an environmental impact, then the monitoring will pick that up. There's going to be a real question around the public health impact, because that's something which is currently unmonitored across our region, and actually, except for bathing water locations, which are primarily coastal, no one understands what the public health impact of those overflows are. And actually, that's not something which you can do using real-time monitoring. You need to take samples, analyse it in the lab, and 4 or 5 days later you'll understand what the impact is. So I think that will be very interesting. I think having a progressive programme to identify those overflows which are having an impact and identifying sustainable solutions is going to be key to this.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Nick.
Yeah. So just to follow on from Paul's point, really, it's disappointing to hear that you have no specific target number for or time frame to stop discharges by. Have you got any specific and tangible plans to reduce those discharges, specifically in Gloucestershire? And if so, what are they?
Yep, so within Gloucestershire we have 11 storm overflows, of which 10 of those are monitored at the moment. The final one will be monitored by March 2023. And also looking at those, we've obviously, with the information which I provided, including the location of those and the spill frequency for 2020, and also the duration of overflows. So particularly you will have seen that within Tetbury, that's one of our most frequent spillers, and we've been identifying that through the storm overflow assessment framework to look at the frequency of that. The reason why Tetbury spills so frequently is because it's a combined system. There's very limited surface water separation within that location, and so we will be looking to work with yourselves as the council to understand what opportunities there are to disconnect surface water from the sewerage system to prevent it from overflowing in the first instance. So very keen to look at sort of the larger inputs, so from sort of schools, industrial estates, supermarkets, that sort of thing in the first instance. Also to understand what is the impact of that discharge as well in terms of water quality and also ecology, which is something we do monitor downstream of Tetbury as well, because we're aware that there are some BAP habitats there, which we have been monitoring for a number of years. So, I mean, essentially our approach is very much to understand what is the impact, and where there is an impact to focus on those.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, not from that.
David.
So again, some similar questions to previous water representatives. So you said you've got some combined sewer overflows and discharge. What work have you done to identify sensitive downstream uses? How are they notified that overflow has occurred? And is there any sort of community funding that can be given? So the example which I have, which is from Severn Trent, I have a park in the division I represent. The sewer is directly upstream of that, and currently there's no notification and what have you, so kids and dogs end up in the water, which probably is contaminated with raw untreated sewage. So it's how are you monitoring it, how are you identifying people, and then is there funding through a community scheme that councils and other community groups can be into?
Well, so 80% of our storm overflows currently have vent duration monitoring on them, and all of them will have that by March 2023. Wessex Water was the first water company to establish a coast watch system, which, as the name implies, relates to the coast. So what that does is it provides notification in real time to interested parties, so local authorities, the RNLI, Environment Agency, and amenity groups in coastal areas when those overflows are operating. We've now rolled that out to a number of amenity sites, none in this area, and don't actually know. So focus there primarily is on amenity in terms of swimming, stand-up paddleboarding, canoe clubs, that sort of thing. So we've extended that to a number of locations outside Gloucestershire because we're not aware of a huge number in this location at the moment, and are providing real-time notification for them. We've also got one location within our area, a place called Whalley Weir, which is just outside Bath, where they are looking for that to become a future bathing water designated site. So we're working very closely with the owner and the Rivers Trust in that location to look at real-time notification as well in terms of water quality. So not only when overflows are operating, it is what part of our notification system there, but also providing real-time data in terms of deterioration in water quality and also river flow as well, because clearly, for a watercourse to be safe to swim, it needs to not just be the quality, but also actually the flow. And so that's something which we are increasingly rolling out at the moment. What we have been doing is actively approaching local swimming clubs, canoe clubs, with the increase in wild swimming, to ask where their locations are and whether they would be interested in that notification system. We've approached a number ourselves, none in this area. We do also, as part of our mapping, online mapping, identify recreational locations as well. So there'll be that fisheries clubs, fisheries associations, and downstream uses as well. So particularly when we have pollution incidents, then we have a list of contacts who will phone up and let them know that that's happened. But that tends to be the pollution incident rather than the operation in terms of permitted discharges. But there's no reason why, once we've rolled out our EDM programme to all locations, we can't extend our existing Coast Watch system for much wider usage. That also goes through, so that's notified to local authorities, as I mentioned. It's also updated in real time on our website and feeds into the Surface Sewage app as well.
Thinking about Tetbury, which I'll be honest, I'm not that familiar with because I represent Cheltenham. But certainly in Cheltenham, we've got lots of people digging up every road, seemingly every road in my division, to install fibre internet. So you were talking about separating out the foul and the storm water.
Yeah.
Have you looked at working with any of the fibre companies and with the county's highways people to see if there is something that you can both dig up the same bit of road at the same time and do the works in one go rather than having it sort of closed and then a few months later someone else coming back and doing the same sort of. So are you looking at those sort of opportunities?
I mean, I think that the issue with surface water separation is it is hugely inconvenient for local residents and very disruptive because, as you say, it does involve digging up roads. About 2.5 times the length of public sewer is actually private sewer, and water companies have no powers to dig up private land. So actually the biggest issue is the connection from the individual property into the private sewer. And currently we don't have any rights to be able to separate that. That is the homeowner's responsibility. So at the moment, whilst working with other utility providers to minimise inconvenience makes absolute sense, it doesn't actually reach the surface water or the ability to be able to separate that in the first instance because it's typically the public sewer which is in the middle of the road and not private laterals.
Fair enough. And the final question from me, which I've asked the other companies, so Thames don't pay a dividend to their shareholders. I think I found that the dividend your company last paid was 56.8 million, which is from one of the latest annual reports. Do you think that some of that money should, rather than going into shareholders, be put into? Can you confirm the amount? And also, do you think that some of that money should be invested into stopping sewage, untreated, raw untreated sewage entering water courses?
So our profit after tax in 2020 was £68.8 million. I think as the previous water company representative mentioned, Thames Water is in a very different position to Wessex Water. Wessex Water is the top performing water company, and therefore we do feel that our shareholders should be entitled to some reward for that. The difference also is actually our shareholders are investing a huge amount elsewhere within our region. They've recently purchased the Filton airstrip, so actually the profits from Wessex Water repurposed and are used as part of that housing and economic regeneration within the North Bristol area. So that's primarily where their profits go. We are owned by a Malaysian company, as mentioned in our notes, but the profits from Wessex Water don't go overseas. It gets repurposed into investment within our area, whether that's through economic regeneration through our YTL company or through Wessex Water's activities as well.
Okay. Yes. Kate?
Not really a question. I just wanted to thank you for being the easiest of the three water companies to engage with, this meeting took a while to get going, didn't it? And actually, you were the only company I think at the beginning who engaged. So I just wanted to say thank you.
One of our sort of ethos, which actually comes very much from the top, from Colin Skellett, is that we want to work with our customers and the authorities that we are within our area, and the best way to do that is to talk to them what the issues are and what the best solutions, particularly with something so complicated as water quality and storm overflows. It's a complex picture, and actually everyone has a part to play. So talking to people helps.
Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. I was a bit surprised to see the position regarding temporary. I was even more surprised because I live in Springfields, which is, I think, is the location of one of your green boxes. And what does this green box actually do? And what does it prevent? Or does it just register things that happen?
So this is the event duration monitor that you're referring to.
Yeah.
Okay, so what that is that's essentially a sensor on the overflow. Overflow is obviously a pipe which, when it fills to a certain level, flow will go over that. But what the EDM monitors is when that overflow is in operation. So what it's saying is it's quite binary. It's either it's operating or it's not. So what it doesn't tell, so what it tells you is when it starts operating and for how long it operates for and when it stops. It doesn't tell you how much flow is going over that overflow. So either in terms of velocity or volume. It's just literally it's starting or stopping. So what we might find is that actually on some days the overflow is operating, there's a little dribble going out, and sometimes it's actually the pipe is at full bore. We don't know that. It's just literally it's either operating or it's not. And that's the data which is reported here and also fed back to the environment.
To my knowledge, we don't have any flooding on Springfields.
No, I'm not aware of any flooding in that location, but that's probably because the overflow is operating, preventing flooding.
Can you easily identify when it's working?
Yes. Instantaneous. It goes straight to our control room.
Okay, thank you.
Just
Paul.
one final question. You mentioned earlier about proactively approaching swim while swimming. I didn't quite catch when you said the bathing spot was.
Yeah, so Whalley Weir, it's just outside Bath. Give you a link to our website there.
Yeah. How would we go about getting one in some in Gloucestershire, because that's one of our aims?
So bathing water designation is coordinated through DEFRA, so interested parties have to make an application.
Okay.
It has to be supported by the local authority, and typically the water companies are consulted as part of that process. What you have to do is demonstrate that there is a need, so there's usage there, and also amenity as well, and typically car parking and things like that. There's nothing to do with water quality, it's all about use.
Right.
And
but the water quality could be awful.
Absolutely, and there's typically no data on water quality in terms of public health. So under the Bathing Waters Directive, you're looking at E. coli and intestinal enterococci, which are not routinely monitored by the Environment Agency or water companies either. So often it is unknown as to whether or not that stretch of water will pass the standards.
So to rectify that, what would you suggest then? That would be national legislation, I assume.
It would be. I mean, the Environment Agency has a duty then to monitor once the site is designated, but not until that point. And the funding is not released for them to enable them to do that until that application is supported by DEFRA.
Yeah.
So, which is a bit of an issue, really. So, yeah. I mean, there are opportunities for citizen scientists to go out and take data as well. And where we've been approached by local groups, we've actually gone out and helped them. So typically, we've got a couple of locations. So Farley Hungerford is another location where there's a swimming club. We take the samples for them throughout the bathing season, and actually throughout the year, on a fortnightly basis, and report the data to them. Again, there's another location just outside Bristol that's looking to apply for bathing status. They've approached us and we've said we're looking to get 2 years worth of data. It's in everyone's interest. It doesn't make a very good story if you apply for bathing status, and it's in fact there's no one's interest to do that. And typically these locations are well used by swimmers anyway, irrespective of whether they're designated.
Thank you. Thanks.
Graham.
Yeah, we heard a lot about this storm crossover where older properties got drain pipes and drainage roofs and such going to the old sewer systems, and obviously it would be a huge undertaking to get all those pipes to be separate and a standard. Do you have any innovative plans, like we've heard from some of the other water companies, where you're looking at maybe these smarter water butts, where these type of properties that water could be collected in a rainwater butt, then let off slowly, so that hold it back, so they don't overwhelm, these combined systems?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately there are issues here with what is the homeowner's responsibility, what is the water company's responsibility, and also what is the local authority's responsibility as well. What we are doing is, particularly the locations where we have high frequency spillers, or where there are issues with flooding, we're looking at alternatives as well. And there are various different sorts of mapping tools that you can use for that. So we've been doing quite a lot of work with a consultancy called Atkins to look at options there. And some of that includes things like using green roofs, some of it includes separating out systems, some of it includes SUDs, again, working with communities at street level to do things like innovative water butts, or actually looking to see if there's a localised place where you could install, retrofit a SUD, sustainable drainage system. It all is very location specific, and also community specific. So a lot of this is about sort of understanding what are the options and opportunities, who are the willing partners to work together in this, and then actually sort of co-designing, co-delivering with local communities. There's very limited funding. I think the surface water rebate is about £23 per property, so there's no incentive.
Well, the increase in these storms and the severity of them, surely that's got to be a priority for everybody, I presume.
Absolutely.
As it goes on.
Yeah, and working with local authorities and particularly building control to understand whether there can be the opportunity to get planning permission for paving over driveways, and looking at extensions as well, so under the current threshold as well, because all of that contributes towards a problem, and civil engineering will only get us so far.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm looking round to Sue in particular, because I'm constantly bringing her in last, so I'm going to give her an opportunity now. Have you got any questions, Sue?
Oh, bless you. No, I did have my hand raised earlier, and it was with regard to the issues at Tetbury, that you were saying with regard to the monitoring system there. And I think it's already been answered, because the sound was going in and out, but I could see that the councillor for Tetbury was nodding his head. So I'll catch up later rather than sort of hold you up now. But as I say, the sound's not been terribly good this end, so I can catch up with the minutes.
Your sound coming in this way is far better than anything else we've had this afternoon.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, I can assure you. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ruth's voice has been going in and out.
Virtual. Yeah. Thanks, Sue. I'm looking at other members. Any other questions? If not, there's one. I mean, apart from effluent discharge, one of the other things we are looking at as a group is water quality, bathing quality. Have you got any plans anywhere in the Wessex region for creating more open water swimming, wild swimming, etc.? Can you advise us on that?
So I think because we don't have responsibility for open water swimming or wild swimming, it's really for either for the Environment Agency or local communities to promote that themselves. Our approach is very much where we're aware of interested parties, we work with them to help them collect and provide the data that they need to know. Also, we've got, I can send you a link to our WarleyWeir webpage. One thing which we're looking to do is be able to provide real-time notification of water quality as well. I mean, ultimately, some kind of very easy, almost traffic light system to say it's fine to swim, it's not fine to swim, but also recognising that water quality is not the only element of, it's river safety. It's, cold water shock and flow is also an issue. So we're very open to conversations with local groups who want to either seek designation or want to understand a bit more about the location where they're swimming.
Thank you. I've got Nick.
Just to follow on from that point, really. If we get to a point with this group where we are able to identify a body of water and are interested in designating it, would Wessex Water be interested in working with us and monitoring that water for us? Is that something that you've done with other groups? Is that something you'd be open to, perhaps?
Yeah, so certainly up until the designation process, we're very willing to do that. It depends, because as part of the designation process, there needs to be a sort of, in beaches, it's a beach owner, so there needs to be a responsible party who has the responsibility for that bathing water at that location. So typically that would be local authorities in other locations across our patches, things like people like the National Trust where it's a private beach. Once a location is designated, it then becomes that kind of beach owner responsible party's responsibility to provide all the signage, particularly for that bathing water, and then it's the Environment Agency who undertakes the monitoring. But certainly we're very keen to engage in that preliminary stage to understand, well, will this bathing water pass? What are the issues which need to be identified there? What is the investment by all parties which needs to be involved?
Thank you. Looking around for any other questions from members. You've come a considerable long way, I would imagine, with Wessex. I hope you found that your trip has been worthwhile. But certainly, from us, if no one's got anything else for you, then thank you for the advanced information. Thank you for the input. And like everybody that's addressed us this afternoon, I think in a very relaxed and honest way. So thank you for that. And let's hope. Let's hope we see some created wild swimming. If we can't get them in Gloucestershire, we're going to have to come down South Gloucester and beyond, perhaps for a wild swim. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, I mean, we've had our 3 presentations. We've been through, on Friday we went through some, shall we say, forward planning work in relation to other bodies that we're seeking to get in. Certainly the one raised by Kate and the one I suggested in relation to the NFU. While we're here as a group, is there anyone else we would perhaps like to get an invitation into now to hear from? Obviously